Hey guys, welcome back to Asher Books. So today I'm going to do my May Part 1 wrap up. So I've got the first 5 books that I read for the month. So I'm going to go ahead and jump into talking about them. So the first book I read was Vicious by L.J. Shen. This is the second book I've read by this author and I did really enjoy it. So I gave this book 4 stars, maybe like a 3.5 stars, and I don't know. I know so many people love this book. They love Vicious, and it's one of their favorite books by this author. I read Midnight Blue, I think it was last month, and I actually liked that one better. So Vicious follows a guy named Vicious, it's like a nickname, and it follows Amelia, and they know each other in high school, and he is just vicious. He tortures her and it's definitely a very much so a hate to love story. He taunts her, but it's also a really fine line between like love and hate. So Vicious is very wealthy and Amelia's parents are his parents, like housekeepers, so they like run the big house. So there's that dynamic that's different, kind of the very wealthy and the working class. So it starts off there. So eventually something happens when they're teenagers and this like love-hate kind of collides, but then something happens and they don't see each other for about 10 years. It flashes forward to 10 years later and they see each other again kind of randomly. And Amelia is really like down on her luck money-wise, and she really needs this money to help take care of her sister. So Vicious concocts this plan to like offer her a job as his basically assistant, but he wants he has something else in mind for her to help him with as well. And it's their love story. I did really like this book. The biggest thing for me was it was just a little forgettable for me. I read this book at the first of the month and I just don't remember all the details, and for me that just means it wasn't maybe as impactful. Having said that, it was a really like enjoyable book to read, and if you want like a bad boy with like that really strong hate to love, definitely check it out. I definitely will be reading more from L.J. Shen. This one just wasn't my absolute favorite. The second book I read this month was Pretty Face by Lucy Parker. I love Lucy Parker. This is the third book I've read from her. So this one is book 2 actually in her London Celebrity series. I've already read books 1 and 3 because I'm incapable of reading books in the correct order in a romance series. But her new book just came out a couple weeks ago, The Austen Playbook, and I really wanted to read that. So I wanted to go back and read book 2. And I'm so glad I did because this was my favorite so far of hers. I will report back after I read book 4 if it still is, but this was adorable. So this book follows Luke and Lily is an actress and she's kind of in this really like soapy TV show where she's not really able to kind of show her acting ability as much as just being a pretty face. And kind of, this book really looks into, how people kind of judge you based on your looks. And if you are a, attractive person, sometimes that can honestly hurt you because all they want you to do is just stand there and look pretty rather than kind of have any talent. So she really wants to kind of break into the theater scene, and she finally like gets her foot in the door for this West End production of this really big play. And then Luke Savage is the director, and he's also the owner of this new theater he's been like renovating and doing. It's a huge production and it will be a really big deal for her to get this part. So she gets her foot in this door for this audition and the two of them meet. He at first wants nothing to do with her because he thinks she is just a pretty face and has like no acting ability whatsoever. Obviously, he changes his mind. This was just the perfect book. It had the witty dialogue and banter. When you read her books, I really feel like you're watching like a TV show. It just goes by so fast and you quickly fall in love with the characters. I love that you get to see both perspectives. And Luke is a very I don't know, I wouldn't say he's rude, but he's very to the point. And he very much so is very successful, but he knows that. And he's successful because he's very like one-track minded. Work is like his life. So in this, there's also an age gap. So Lily is about 26 and I think Luke is in his late 30s or early 40s. So if you like an age gap, there's one there, which really was interesting. It kind of played interesting dynamic about the two of them. Obviously too, having the director dating the actress in a play is perhaps gonna cause some problems with like the paparazzi and things like that. So I just loved it. I thought the character growth, you see a lot about her family and his family and their backstory, and kind of their different ways of handling relationships. It had everything. It had like angst, but not too much. It was funny, it was sweet. I'm telling you guys, if you haven't picked up this book, go pick it up. I gave it 5 stars, as I've given all of her books, and I just can't recommend it enough. The next book I read was A Match Made in Bed by Kathy Maxwell. This is book 2 in the Spinster Heiress series by Kathy Maxwell. And as previously stated, incapable of reading in the correct order, but I really don't think it really matters in this series. So I just love the cover on this one, and that's totally why I picked this book up, because I thought it was just a really cute cover. So this book, the whole series basically follows 3 heiresses who are kind of deemed spinsters, which I'd like to point out, they're like 22, 23, and they're spinsters, but in that time, you know, things were different. So basically these girls have a lot of money, but for whatever reason, you know, whether it's their dad being really picky, or something quote unquote like wrong with them, they haven't married yet. So in this book, we follow Cassandra, who her father is very wealthy, and she is kind of known for like speaking her mind, and obviously that's frowned upon in this time period as well. And then it follows Soren, and Soren and Cassandra basically knew each other as children, and they were actually really good friends when they were like 10 or 11, but something happens and they both think the other completely betrays them, and you kind of find out what happened and why there was this like big kind of a miscommunication, I guess you'd say. And Soren actually was sent to Canada to live with family members, and he has just recently come back, but he's had a big life over there. He, you know, was in the military and had a lot of things happen over there, but he really, really needs money to kind of rebuild the family from what his like father and his grandfather basically ran it into the ground. So he knows Cass from being a friend, and he thinks, oh, I think she'll be able to marry me. Obviously things don't really go to plan, because she thinks he betrayed her years and years ago, and he thinks that she betrayed him. So, you know, things come to light that happened, but this was really adorable. Like, it was super cute. Pretty lighthearted for a historical romance. It takes place in like 1812, I believe, so it's actually a little bit earlier than some of the ones I think I've read recently. I liked that. It was kind of different, and overall it was just a really fun read. You know, obviously it's always interesting when you have that like money dynamic going on. The women basically know these men are marrying them just for their money. Obviously it turns into more because it's a romance novel, but I just think that's always really interesting to read and kind of figure out how they, how the men kind of work themselves into their lives, you know? It's always interesting. The next book I read was actually the first book in that Spinster Heiress series, which I don't have with me because I listened to it on audiobook from Hoopla, but it's called If I Ever Should Love You, and this one was really different. I will say this one I gave 4 stars, probably like a 3.54 again. I did really enjoy the second book, which is the first book. The first book, If I Ever Should Love You, follows Leonie and Roman. And Leonie, again, she's an heiress. Her father is very wealthy. And then it follows Roman, who was in the military, and they actually knew each other when they were she was about 17. He was, I think, in his early 20s. In India, when both her father and his family, and he was like serving in the military over there. Roman actually saved Leonie from a really bad situation. And so he's back, he's taking over the family kind of, and he's inherited this title, and his house is legitimately falling down. Like, I'm not even like using that as a metaphor, it's falling down. So he really desperately needs this money, and he knows Leonie from his past, and again, kind of is thinking, you know, maybe she'll help me by marrying me, kind of thinking it won't be too hard of a feat. Now, this book is interesting because it really deals with some heavier subject matter than I think a lot of historicals do. So kind of just keep that in mind if you're going into this. It's not a light-hearted, fluffy read as the second one was. This one definitely deals with like alcoholism, and it deals with sexual assault, things like that, you know, I think are important to read, and I'm glad that this author did choose to kind of show characters with those things, because obviously things like that were going on even back in the 1800s. However, it just wasn't the easiest book to kind of read at the time, or all of the time. So because of the event Roman saved Leonie from when she was 17, she has kind of moved on with life, but she's also got a lot of kind of baggage. She's got a lot of kind of things she's been working through, and one way she does that is by drinking. And obviously people drank a lot back then, but it was really interesting to show how the difference was. Like, where's the line between, yes, you can enjoy a drink, but when do you become kind of an alcoholic? So it's a beautiful love story, and I really did enjoy it. But at times you just hate the main character. And I hate to say that because I'm sure I've never personally dealt with alcoholism, you know, firsthand, but I'm sure dealing with that, you're gonna have good days and then you're gonna kind of go, so like 2 steps forward, 3 steps back. And I think at times it was a little difficult to read, especially on audiobook maybe, because it just felt like you were constantly like cheering them on, and then they'd go back and then cheering them on, and then so it was just a little tricky that way. But at the same time, you know, I'm glad that it was kind of portrayed, if that makes any sense. So at the end of the day, it was an enjoyable book, and I definitely want to pick up the 3rd book in the Spinster Heiress series. The last book I read this month so far was The Simple Wilds by K.A. Tucker. I love this book so much. It was so good. I had seen a lot of people reading this book, and I was trying not to get my expectations too high and be let down, but they were completely met. I gave it 5 stars, and I just cannot say enough good things about this book. So this book follows Calla, and she is living in Toronto. She works at a bank. She's kind of still living at home with her family. Which are fairly wealthy. She's a city girl, but her father lives in Alaska, and that's where she and her mom lived with him until she was about 2. And she had like an on and off again relationship with her father until about 12 years ago when she was about 14, I believe, and then she hasn't heard from him or kind of spoken with him since. But she gets a call one day that he is very sick and that she needs to come to Alaska to kind of get to know him and spend time with him. So she decides to go and kind of find out, you know, what he's like and kind of get to know him before maybe she doesn't have a chance to. This book was so fantastic. Like, the setting of Alaska, I never thought I would enjoy reading a book with an Alaskan setting. It just wasn't one that, you know, I thought I would like, but it was just so vivid, and it played such a like character in the book, because this is not like Anchorage here they're going to. This is like a very tiny town in Alaska. You know, Calla is a very girly girl. She runs like a blog as well, so she's very into like hair and makeup and never going out without it and looking good. So in the book, Calla also, you know, kind of figures out, you know, what's important in life. I'm not saying makeup's not important. I'm not saying that looking nice isn't important, but I definitely think in this book, Calla kind of becomes her own person and figures out who she is. So while she's in Alaska, she also meets a pilot named Jonah, who they kind of refer to as like the Sky Cowboys. Her dad owns kind of like an airplane company where they bring people around different places. Obviously in Alaska, it's one of the main ways they get around is by plane. So Jonah is this big, burly, she calls him like the Yeti. When she first meets him, he's wearing like oversized plaid and a huge beard. But oh my gosh, he's so broody, and I loved him so much. They are just butting heads from day one. They just can't get along, but obviously things may happen between them, and it was so, so cute. I loved it. I really think they both helped each other in this book, and I cannot say enough good things. If you have seen this book around but you're not sure, go pick it up. You will not regret it. I am still thinking about this book. I finished it a few days ago, and I am already like Googling where I can find other books set in Alaska. So if you have any good Alaskan set books, let me know. Alright guys, so those are the 5 books that I've read in May so far. Let me know what you guys are reading or what you're up to. I'd love to know. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you next time. Bye!